I was pouring coffee when Evan slid the folder across the table. Just a quiet motion of his hand, almost rehearsed. And when I look back now, that was the moment everything began to shift. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from or what time it is. I'm curious who's listening. It was a mild afternoon, the kind where sunlight comes through the curtains in long, golden lines, almost soft enough to make you forget time exists. The kind of day where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. Evan and Rachel sat on opposite sides of me, but they were aligned, in posture, in silence, in purpose. I didn't understand that at first. I thought it was just a normal visit. We hadn't all sat at that kitchen table in months, not since the small memorial dinner for Lily. The house had been quiet since then, holding her absence in its walls like a folded note. I remembered the smell of the coffee, strong, familiar, and the creak of the chair as Evan leaned forward. He placed the folder right in front of me, centered. Not next to me, not off to the side, centered. A choice made with intention. "We just want to help make things easier," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, like someone rehearsed composure in the car before walking in. Rachel nodded. She didn't look at me, just at the table. I smiled back, because that's what I've always done with my children. When the air feels delicate, my instinct has always been to cushion the world for them. Tuikitue, soften edges to make things comfortable. But I didn't open the folder, not right away. Something about the timing felt arranged. We talked about small things first. How work was going, how school was for Jacob, how the weather had been unpredictable this season. Normal conversations, if a bit thinner than usual, like fabric worn down from too much washing. Then Evan nudged the folder again, gently. "Dad, it's just estate stuff. Standard. We thought we'd go over it with you, estate stuff. Standard.deet. I hadn't asked for help with anything. My bills were paid. The house was maintained. I wasn't. Forgetting stove burners or repeating conversations. I was grieving. Yes, but grief is not incompetence. Still, I opened the folder. Inside were printed documents. Legal formatting, fine text, signature lines at the bottom. The kind of paperwork designed to look official enough to discourage curiosity. My wife's name was typed in the header, or had been. It was crossed out cleanly, a line drawn straight through the letters of her name. Lily Hayes. Gone in ink the way she left in breath. I didn't speak for a moment. It's strange, the things that cut deepest, not the loud betrayals, not the angry words, not even the final goodbyes. It's the small, quiet erasures. I scanned the first page, slow and careful. Always slow, always careful. I've never been reckless with ink. There were phrases couched in warm language. Future planning. Simplified estate transition. Minimizing burden. Nice words that felt like soft fabric stretched over something sharp. But when I turned to the second page, I noticed it. The beneficiary list. Not blank, not wrong, just incomplete. There was Evan's name. There was Rachel's name. But the third line, the one that should have held Jacob's, was gone. Not crossed out, not replaced, just missing, like someone had decided not to include him, like someone wanted something cleaner, simpler, more direct. I looked up. Rachel was still staring at the table, fingers tracing an invisible shape in the wood. Evan watched me with the kind of expression that tries to look casual, but isn't. And then there was Claire. I hadn't heard her walk into the room. She simply appeared in the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame, holding 2 cups of tea. Chamomile? Always chamomile? She smiled, warm and gentle, as if her presence alone balanced the air. "We just want things to be smooth for you," she said softly. "Like reassurance, like care. But there was something in her tone, something measured. I closed the folder. "I'll think about it," I said. No raised voice, no accusation, just a sentence. The air tightened. Imperceptible, but real. Claire's smile stayed exactly where it was, but her eyes flickered. One small, precise movement, like someone adjusting a calculation. I didn't know the full shape of what was happening. Not yet, but I knew enough to slow down, to observe, to wait. Because sometimes the most dangerous things come disguised as help. And sometimes the first battle is simply not signing your name. I've lived in this house for 32 years. Every door frame, every corner, every uneven floorboard has a memory attached to it. When I tell this story, I realize it isn't just about property. It's about what lives inside it. How long you've lived where you live. A month? A year? Maybe your whole life. The house sits on a quiet street with slow traffic and wide trees. The kind of place where neighbors wave without expecting conversation. When Lily and I moved in, we were young and full of plans. The walls were bare then. The yard was plain. But Lily could see the finished picture before anything existed. She said homes weren't built. They were grown. The living room still smells faintly of the lavender cleaner she used. I haven't changed brands. There's no reason to. The sunlight falls the same way it did 20 years ago. Long rectangles moving across the floorboards throughout the day. There's a soft echo when you walk down the hallway. It never bothered us. It only meant the house was spacious enough for sound to breathe. As I walked through the rooms after they left that day, I saw everything differently. The house hadn't changed, but something about the air inside it had. The folder was still on the kitchen counter, closed, untouched. But it might as well have been open. It lingered in the atmosphere, like a question no one wanted to ask directly. I paused in the hallway where we charted the children's heights. Pencil lines stacked over time. Evan at 6, Rachel at 4, then 7 and 5, 11 and 9. A lifetime marked in centimeters. No one had looked closely at those walls in years, but they were still there. Proof of time spent, not traded. This house had held arguments and laughter and sickness and birthdays and snow days and storms. It had held Lily's quiet laughter, her humming while she cooked, the crease between her eyebrows when she read instructions for furniture assembly. The only thing that ever changed was us, growing into the spaces we needed at the time. But now, for the first time, the house felt like it was being measured for something else. I went to the dining room next. The oak table in the center wasn't bought. I built it. Every joint was sanded by hand. There's a thin scratch across the middle from when Rachel, at 13, dragged her science fair model across it without lifting. She apologized, crying, afraid I'd be upset. I laughed then. I told her some marks were worth keeping. They meant something happened here. It's strange, the way memories return when you feel something slipping. I walked to my home office, though it hasn't been used for work in years. I opened the drawer where I kept the old mortgage documents. The paper had yellowed slightly around the edges. I remembered the day we made the final payment, the quiet relief in my chest, the feeling of arrival. No one could take the past away, but the future could be rewritten if I wasn't careful. I held the final mortgage payoff letter in my hands. It was a single sheet, simple, clear, paid in full. No liens, no debts, no obligations. The house wasn't a burden. It was a promise. I placed that letter on the kitchen counter beside the new documents they had left. One paper held history. The other held intention. The difference between the two felt like the difference between memory and strategy. I didn't blame Evan and Rachel, not yet. They were my children. And grief rearranges people differently. It had rearranged me too. Pain doesn't always make people greedy. Sometimes it makes them scared. But something about the missing name, Jacob's name, stayed with me. Why remove a future that had done nothing wrong? The house creaked as the temperature changed. Old wood always responds to the environment. It moves with the weather, stretches and settles. I've always liked that. It makes the house feel alive. I sat down at the table, the same seat where Lily used to read the newspaper in the mornings. The folder sat in front of me. I didn't open it again. I just rested my hand on the closed cover. The house had always protected us, always held us. Now it was my turn to protect it. I knew then, if I signed those papers, the house would stop being a home. It would become a transaction, and once something becomes a transaction, it can be sold. I wasn't ready to speak to them about it yet, but I knew I needed to see what was underneath their words. From this point forward, I would watch more closely, listen more, carefully, say less. The house had taught me that some things are worth holding on to, not because they're valuable, but because they mean something. I've always believed that details tell the truth long before people do. Sometimes, all you need to understand a situation is to read slowly. Do you read things before you sign, or do you just trust people? The next morning, the house felt unusually still, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, the kind that waits. I made breakfast the same way as always. 2 eggs, toast, black coffee. Habits anchor you when the ground shifts beneath your feet. I sat at the table, the folder still lying where I left it. I didn't rush toward it. I just let it sit there, like a question that deserved patience. When I finally opened it again, the paper made a soft sound. Crisp, deliberate, almost formal. Legal documents are designed to look intimidating. The formatting is tight, the language clinical, the ink too certain. But fear doesn't come from the text itself. It comes from the implications of not paying attention. The first few pages were familiar. Lists of assets, standard phrasing about transitions, durable powers of attorney, everything presented as helpful, necessary, protective. I could almost hear Claire's voice layered. Under the language, the kind of reassurance that sounds like comfort, but guides you somewhere, people. Think manipulation is forceful. It's usually gentle. I reached the signature page. That's where the truth was. My name was printed neatly above a blank line. Evan's name and Rachel's name were printed under successor, beneficiaries, but where a third space should have been, where Jacob's name should have been, there was nothing. Not even an empty line, just absence, not a mistake, not oversight, a choice. When a name is removed, it isn't debris, it's direction. My grandson is 8 years old. He still laughs without thinking, still waves both arms when he sees someone he loves. He draws houses with windows too big and people with round heads shaped like moons. He tells stories that go nowhere and everywhere. His world is simple, safe, honest. Who decides that a future like that doesn't matter? The house wasn't just mine. It had been built around family, around continuity. To cut him out meant someone wanted control that extended further than memory. Control over outcome. I traced the space where his name should have been. The paper felt smooth, unfinished, like something waiting to be claimed. And I thought of Lily. Before she got sick, she told me something I didn't understand at the time. Love isn't just giving, it's protecting, even from the people we love. It sounded harsh then. It feels prophetic now. I flipped the document back to the first page and looked again with new eyes. Not as a father trying to avoid conflict, but as someone who finally recognized the shape of a hand guiding the pen. This wasn't my children's handwriting, this was Claire's. Vocabulary streamlined, efficient, transition. Minimize confusion in later years. Soft words, rounded corners, velvet just thick enough to hide the steel underneath. There was a time I would have signed without thinking. Trusted, because trust was the foundation of everything I built. I taught Evan how to ride a bike on the driveway here. I held Rachel's hand through her first heartbreak in the living room. I held their fears, their failures, their hopes, but somewhere along the line they learned to listen to her more than to memory. I wasn't angry. Not then. Anger is loud. It demands. It breaks. What I felt was something quieter. A settling. A realization that something had shifted, long before the folder ever arrived. The house creaked softly as the morning sunlight changed. I set the document down and closed it gently. Not rejecting, not accepting, just not moving. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not signing is not passive. It is resistance. I placed the folder in the top drawer of the kitchen sideboard. Visible, reachable, unhidden. I wanted to remember that I hadn't run from it. I had simply paused. There was a clarity forming now, a soft outline of something larger than paperwork. But clarity is not the same as action. Not yet. As I closed the drawer, the wood made a quiet, final sound. I exhaled slowly. The first line had been drawn, not on paper, but inside me. And once a line is drawn, everything on either side begins to reveal itself. Claire always made tea like it was an act of care. Measured water, slow pour, quiet patience, chamomile on days that were heavy, peppermint on days that were busy, and Earl Grey on days that needed reflection. That afternoon, she chose chamomile. Tea or coffee? I want to know who's listening. She arrived with a soft knock on the door. Not hurried, not hesitant, just placed. When I opened it, she stood there with a warm smile and a paper bag from the bakery down the street. "I brought those lemon pastries you like," she said. Her tone was light, not performative, not false, just composed. Claire's strength was never persuasion. It was comfort. She made you feel seen, understood, cared for. The kind of presence that relaxes defenses without asking for them to be lowered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one from before. Sunlight slanting across the surface, dust floating in the air like quiet punctuation. She unpacked the pastries. I got the plates. Everything unfolded like routine. Familiar, safe. But routine, I've learned, can be choreography. "How are you feeling lately?" she asked, pouring the tea. Her voice held the shape of concern, but her eyes, those tell more than words, were measuring. "I'm doing all right," I said. She stirred her cup, even though chamomile doesn't need stirring. The spoon made a soft metallic tap. Controlled rhythm. "I know it's been a lot," she continued. "These past months, adjusting. Grief comes in waves." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the steam rising from her cup, like the words weren't meant to land, just to create atmosphere. I nodded. I didn't disagree. Grief does come in waves, but this conversation wasn't about grief. It was about what grief can be used to justify. She shifted into the real topic almost seamlessly. The way a river curves without announcing the turn. "Jatiyu, think Evan and Rachel just don't want things to feel overwhelming later," she said. "You know, paperwork, transitions, decisions. They're just trying to take responsibility early." A perfectly reasonable sentence. A sentence no one could argue with without sounding defensive. Claire was very good at this. "I understand planning," I replied, "but I'm not overwhelmed. And I haven't asked for help." Her smile didn't falter. It softened, just slightly, as if my words were a small sadness she needed to hold for me. "I know," she said gently. "That's exactly why we want to help, before it becomes stressful." There was a pause. Not silence. Pause. Intentional. Her hand reached into her bag, but not for pastries. She pulled out a typed sheet of paper, folded in thirds, crisp, prepared. I made something, she said, sliding it toward me, just to help visualize everything. It's nothing official, just clarity. The sheet was titled Estate Simplification Checklist underneath. In smaller text, for ease and peace of mind, the ID language was warm. Every bullet point held a tone of reassurance, ensuring smooth transitions for loved ones, reducing unnecessary stress in emotionally difficult times, protecting your wishes clearly and compassionately. But then, halfway down the page, there it was, disposition of property, upon mental decline, not illness, not age, not incapacity, mental decline, a future written in past tense, as if inevitable, as if already assumed. I looked up. Claire wasn't watching the paper. She was watching me. Her smile never changed, but behind it, an entire calculation lived. She knew I saw it, so she softened further, leaning in just enough to appear earnest, not intrusive. "You've always taken care of everyone," she said. "We just want to make sure someone takes care of you." It was a beautiful sentence. Kind, tear-worthy, even, which is why it was dangerous, because sometimes manipulation doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like relief. But relief, offered too early, is often preparation. Place the checklist down carefully, not rejecting it, not acknowledging it, just placing it. "Thank you," I said. "I'll look this over." Claire relaxed, slightly, as if she believed progress had been made. She sipped her tea again. The aroma was soft, floral, calming. We talked about small things after that. Jacob's school play, the new furniture Evan wanted to buy, the weather again. The pastries were very good. The afternoon passed quietly, but when she stood to leave, she glanced, almost casually, toward the drawer where I'd placed the original documents. She didn't open it, she didn't mention it, she just looked. Then she smiled. Again, warm, polite, soft. "I'm glad we talked," she said. When the door closed behind her, the house felt different. Not threatened, just observed. I sat back down at the kitchen table. Tea, cooling checklist in front of me. Kindness had wrapped itself around strategy, and I would need to learn how to unwrap it. Slowly. I've always believed. The garden shows the truth of a house. Walls can hide tension. Voices can hide regret. But a garden tells you how people love, how they wait, how they change. Do you have a favorite quiet place? The gate to my garden has always squeaked at the start of spring. I used to promise myself I'd oil the hinges before the warm weather arrived, but I never did. Somehow, the sound became part of the season, a reminder that things grow again, that life continues even when we don't feel ready. The day after tea with Claire, Evan and Rachel came by, unannounced. Not together, but separately. That's the best way I can describe it. They stood on the porch with that shared calmness again, the rehearsed ease, and Claire followed just a moment later, as if she had been walking a step behind them invisibly. They suggested we walk through the garden. "Fresh air," they said. "Good to get outside," they said. I agreed. Partly because I wanted to see how they'd behave when nothing was being said out loud. The garden was quiet. Wind moving through leaves. The soft scrape of shoes on the stone path. Evan walked with his hands in his pockets, like someone hiding a thought. Rachel traced her fingers along the tops of the wild lavender. Claire walked just behind us, eyes observant but soft. She didn't speak first. She didn't have to. "This could be something beautiful," Claire finally said, looking toward the back fence. "If we opened it up, maybe added raised beds, maybe a sitting area for family holidays." She was describing the garden as if it belonged to a future she already controlled. Evan nodded. He didn't add anything. He didn't need to. The first few pages were familiar. Lists of assets, standard phrasing about transitions, durable powers of attorney. Everything presented as helpful, necessary, protective. I could almost hear Claire's voice layered under. The language? The kind of reassurance that sounds like comfort, but guides you somewhere. People think manipulation is forceful. It's usually gentle. I reached the signature page. That's where the truth was. My name was printed neatly above a blank line. Evan's name and Rachel's name were printed under successor beneficiaries. But where a third space should have been, where Jacob's name should have been, there was nothing. Not even an empty line. Just absence. Not a mistake. Not oversight. A choice. When a name is removed, it isn't debris. It's direction. My grandson is 8 years old. He still laughs without thinking, still waves both arms when he sees someone he loves. He draws houses with windows too big and people with round heads shaped like moons. He tells stories that go nowhere and everywhere. His world is simple, safe, honest. Who decides that a future like that doesn't matter? The house wasn't just mine. It had been built around family, around continuity. To cut him out meant someone wanted control that extended further than memory. Control over outcome. I traced the space where his name should have been. The paper felt smooth, unfinished, like something waiting to be claimed. And I thought of Lily. Before she got sick, she told me something I didn't understand at the time. Love isn't just giving, it's protecting, even from the people we love. It sounded harsh then. It feels prophetic now. I flipped the document back to the first page and looked again with new eyes. Not as a father trying to avoid conflict, but as someone who finally recognized the shape of a hand guiding the pen. This wasn't my children's handwriting. This was Claire's vocabulary. Streamlined, efficient transition. Minimize confusion in later years. Soft words, rounded corners, velvet just thick enough to hide the steel underneath. There was a time I would have signed without thinking. Trusted, because trust was the foundation of everything I built. I taught Evan how to ride a bike on the driveway here. I held Rachel's hand through her first heartbreak in the living room. I held their fears, their failures, their hopes. But somewhere along the line, they learned to listen to her more than to memory. I wasn't angry. Not then. Anger is loud. It demands. It breaks. What I felt was something quieter. A settling. A realization that something had shifted long before the folder ever arrived. The house creaked softly as the morning sunlight changed. I set the document down and closed it gently. Not rejecting, not accepting, just not moving. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not signing is not passive. It is resistance. I placed the folder in the top drawer of the kitchen sideboard. Visible, reachable, unhidden. I wanted to remember that I hadn't run from it. I had simply paused. There was a clarity forming now, a soft outline of something larger than paperwork. But clarity is not the same as action. Not yet. As I closed the drawer, the wood made a quiet, final sound. I exhaled slowly. The first line had been drawn, not on paper, but inside me. And once a line is drawn, everything on either side begins to reveal itself. Claire always made tea like it was an act of care. Measured water, slow pour, quiet patience. Chamomile on days that were heavy. Peppermint on days that were busy. And Earl Grey on days that needed reflection. That afternoon, she chose chamomile. Tea or coffee? I want to know who's listening. She arrived with a soft knock on the door. Not hurried, not hesitant, just placed. When I opened it, she stood there with a warm smile and a paper bag from the bakery down the street. "I brought those lemon pastries you like," she said. Her tone was light, not performative, not false, just composed. Claire's strength was never persuasion. It was comfort. She made you feel seen, understood, cared for. The kind of presence that relaxes defenses without asking for them to be lowered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one from before. Sunlight slanting across the surface, dust floating in the air like quiet punctuation. She unpacked the pastries. I got the plates. Everything unfolded like routine, familiar, safe. But routine, I've learned, can be choreography. "How are you feeling lately?" she asked, pouring the tea. Her voice held the shape of concern, but her eyes, those tell more than words, were measuring. "I'm doing all right," I said. She stirred her cup, even though chamomile doesn't need stirring. The spoon made a soft metallic tap. Controlled rhythm. "I know it's been a lot," she continued. "These past months. Adjusting. Grief comes in waves." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the steam rising from her cup, like the words weren't meant to land, just to create atmosphere. I nodded. I didn't disagree. Grief does come in waves. But this conversation wasn't about grief. It was about what grief can be used to justify. She shifted into the real topic almost seamlessly, the way a river curves without announcing the turn. "I think Evan and Rachel just don't want things to feel overwhelming later," she said. "You know, paperwork, transitions, decisions. They're just trying to take responsibility early." A perfectly reasonable sentence. A sentence no one could argue with without sounding defensive. Claire was very, very good at this. "I understand planning," I replied, "but I'm not overwhelmed, and I haven't asked for help." Her smile didn't falter. It softened, just slightly, as if my words were a small sadness she needed to hold for me. "I know," she said gently. "That's exactly why we want to help. Before it becomes stressful." There was a pause, not silence. Pause. Intentional. Her hand reached into her bag, but not for pastries. She pulled out a typed sheet of paper, folded in thirds, crisp, prepared. "I made something," she said, sliding it toward me, "just to help visualize everything. It's nothing official, just clarity." The sheet was titled Estate Simplification Checklist underneath. In smaller text, for ease and peace of mind, the language was warm. Every bullet point held a tone of reassurance. Ensuring smooth transitions for loved ones. Reducing unnecessary stress in emotionally difficult times. Protecting your wishes clearly and compassionately. But then, halfway down the page, there it was. Disposition of property upon mental decline. Not illness, not age, not incapacity. Mental decline. A future written in past tense, as if inevitable, as if already assumed. I looked up. Claire wasn't watching the paper. She was watching me. Her smile never changed, but behind it, an entire calculation lived. She knew I saw it. So she softened further, leaning in just enough to appear earnest, not intrusive. "You've always taken care of everyone," she said. "We just want to make sure someone takes care of you." It was a beautiful sentence, kind, tear-worthy even, which is why it was dangerous. Because sometimes manipulation doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like relief. But relief offered too early is often preparation. I placed the checklist down carefully, not rejecting it, not acknowledging it, just placing it. "Thank you," I said. I'll look this over. Claire relaxed, slightly, as if she believed progress had been made. She sipped her tea again. The aroma was soft, floral, calming. We talked about small things after that. Jacob's school play, the new furniture Evan wanted to buy, the weather again. The pastries were very good. The afternoon passed quietly, but when she stood to leave, she glanced, almost casually, toward the drawer where I'd placed the original documents. She didn't open it. She didn't mention it. She just looked. Then she smiled again. Warm, polite, soft. I'm glad we talked, she said. When the door closed behind her, the house felt different. Not threatened, just observed. I sat back down at the kitchen table. Tea cooling. Checklist in front of me. Kindness had wrapped itself around strategy, and I would need to learn how to unwrap it. Slowly. I've always believed the garden shows the truth of a house. Walls can hide tension. Voices can hide regret. But a garden tells you how people love, how they wait, how they change. Do you have a favorite quiet place? The gate to my garden has always squeaked at the start of spring. I used to promise myself I'd oil the hinges before the warm weather arrived, but I never did. Somehow, the sound became part of the season, a reminder that things grow again, that life continues, even when we don't feel ready. The day after tea with Claire, Evan and Rachel came by, unannounced. Not together, but separately. That's the best way I can describe it. They stood on the porch with that shared calmness again, the rehearsed ease, and Claire followed just a moment later, as if she had been walking a step behind them invisibly. They suggested we walk through the garden. Fresh air, they said. Good to get outside, they said. I agreed, partly because I wanted to see how they'd behave when nothing was being said out loud. The garden was quiet, wind moving through leaves, the soft scrape of shoes on the stone path. Evan walked with his hands in his pockets, like someone hiding a thought. Rachel traced her fingers along the tops of the wild lavender. Claire walked just behind us, eyes observant, but soft. She didn't speak first. She didn't have to. This could be something beautiful, Claire finally said, looking toward the back fence. If we opened it up, maybe added raised beds, maybe a sitting area for family holidays. She was describing the garden as if it belonged to a future she already controlled. Evan nodded. He didn't add anything. He didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small black notebook. I had bought it years ago but never used it. Blank pages waiting for purpose. I opened to the first page and wrote, "Do not react. Observe." Just that. A reminder that impulsive responses are invitations. And once you accept those invitations, you are no longer steering the conversation. I noted the date, the time, each message I had received, the exact phrasing, not to confront anyone with it, but to see patterns more clearly over time. This was the you, not legal, not official, but foundational. Awareness documented. When I closed the notebook, the river outside was moving a little faster. Wind had picked up, and the branches of the trees swayed as if agreeing with something I hadn't yet said. I stayed in the cafe for a while longer. Let the thoughts settle. Let silence do its work. Eventually, I paid and stepped outside. The air was crisp enough to bite, but clean. I walked slowly along the banks of the river, listening to the soft sound of water against stone. And then I saw him, Evan, standing near the corner of the cafe patio, hands deep in his coat pockets, eyes scanning for me. Not angry, not aggressive, just waiting. He hadn't texted to see where I was. He already knew. The realization wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, precise. My children weren't just worried, they were coordinated. I stopped walking, not hiding, not avoiding, just acknowledging. Evan saw me and lifted his hand in a small greeting. Not a wave, more like a signal. The river kept moving, the wind kept stirring the leaves, and I understood that the real conversation was just beginning. I didn't go to therapy to talk about grief. I went because I needed to learn how not to be swept by it. Have you ever talked to someone just to stay steady, not to be fixed? The office was small, warm, softly lit. No inspirational posters, no potted plants trying too hard. Just a bookshelf lined with worn spines and a single framed photograph of a coastline. The waves in that photograph looked slow, patient, like they understood time better than people do. Dr. Nora Bennett greeted me with the kind of presence that didn't demand anything. She didn't rush me to sit, didn't ask how I was. She just waited. That waiting was its own kind of invitation. When I sat down, the chair was firm but comfortable. I could feel the tension in my shoulders before I even spoke. "So," she said gently, "you're here." It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement. I told her about the visit, the folder, the missing name, Claire's carefully weighted kindness, the garden, the no that felt small but shook something loose inside the house. I spoke slowly, not because I was choosing my words carefully, but because the words themselves were heavy. They had weight I hadn't felt when I thought them privately. Dr. Bennett listened with that particular attentiveness that therapists have, the kind that doesn't react emotionally, but takes note emotionally. When I finished, she didn't offer comfort. She didn't say I was right. She didn't say I was wrong. She asked, "What did it feel like to say no?" I thought about it. Not the moment itself, but the split second before the word formed. "Necessary," I said, "but also unfamiliar." She nodded. "Because you've spent most of your life making sure other people don't feel discomfort," she said. It wasn't a judgment, just a mirror. I let the silence stretch, letting her words land the way water settles in a glass. She continued, "You love your children. Deeply. That's clear. The issue isn't love. The issue is boundary. When love has no boundary, care turns into compliance." The word settled somewhere behind my ribs. Compliance. Not giving. Not generosity. Not patience. Compliance. I looked at my hands, resting in my lap. They looked the way hands look after years of building things. Homes, gardens, furniture, lives. "How do I protect the good without breaking the relationship?" I asked. Dr. Bennett smiled, not kindly, not warmly, but knowingly. "You can't protect a relationship that requires you to disappear in order to maintain peace." I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because I hadn't let myself consider that peace and silence might be two different things. She walked to her desk and returned with a small printed sheet. One page, plain font, no decoration. Boundary language scripted read like something meant to be practiced, rehearsed, internalized. "I need time before making decisions. I love you, but I am not going to rush. My well-being matters too. If we talk, it will be when everyone is calm. No is not rejection. No is clarity." This was not legal, not strategic, personal, a foundation. She handed me the sheet. "Boundaries," she said, "are not walls. They are the edges of where you end and someone else begins. I held the page lightly between my fingers. What if they don't respect those edges? I asked. She met my eyes, steady, unshaken. Then you will learn who is asking for your love and who is asking for your surrender. There was no anger in her statement, only truth. We sat for a moment longer. The light in the room felt different now. Not warmer, just clearer. Before I left, she said one more thing. You are not choosing conflict. You are choosing self-respect. If others experience that as conflict, that is their discomfort to learn from. The walk back to the car felt slower, not heavy, grounded. I sat behind the wheel, the printed sheet resting on the passenger seat. The ink still smelled fresh. A simple page of words, but it felt like a compass. Not a weapon, not armor, just direction. When I got home, the house was quiet. The drawer was still closed, the documents untouched, but the air felt different, not tense, prepared. There weren't supposed to be speeches. It was just dinner, or that's what they said. When your family gathers, is it loud or quiet? They chose a Sunday evening. The heaty kind of evening where the sky turns the color of faded rose and everything outside feels unhurried. I arrived a little early. The house smelled of rosemary and baked bread. Claire was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back loosely. She always looked like someone prepared for warmth. "Michael," she said, smiling. "Just in time." The dining room was set carefully. Polished silverware, cloth napkins folded into simple shapes, candles unlit but waiting. Not formal, but curated. Thoughtful, prepared. Rachel was setting out glasses while Evan poured water into a carafe. Jacob sat at the table coloring quietly. Little houses, round-headed figures, smiling suns. His drawings always had open windows. I wondered then if he understood something about freedom instinctively. We sat. Small talk, light laughter. Everyone, careful with tone, like people walking on a floor that might creak. The food was good. Claire was a patient cook. She served everything gently, never clattering a plate, never rushing emotion. Her movements had grace, the kind of grace that invites trust, but the timing was what gave everything away. It was too smooth. Halfway through dinner, after the first wave of comfort had settled in, Claire leaned back slightly, wine glass in hand, and spoke in that soft voice of hers, the one that could be mistaken for vulnerability. "You know," she began, "my parents have been talking about downsizing. It's been emotional for them, but planning ahead made it meaningful instead of stressful." She glanced at me, not direct, not pointed, more like offered. I listened. "They're doing it together," she continued, "deciding things while they're still clear-minded, still themselves. It helped them feel peaceful. Peaceful. That was the word designed to land. Rachel nodded slowly, looking down at her plate. Evan took a breath, steady and subtle. "We just want that for us. For all of us." The table didn't feel warm anymore. It felt arranged. I didn't respond. Silence is a language too. Claire leaned in slightly, elbows resting lightly against the table. "You've always taken such good care of everyone, Michael. You've built such a beautiful foundation. We just want to help carry it forward. Carry it forward. Ownership disguised as honor." Her phrasing reminded me of something Dr. Bennett said. Care can be a strategy if it expects something in return. Jacob finished his drawing and tugged at my sleeve. "Look, Grandpa." The house in his drawing had flowers in every window, and there were 3 stick figures holding hands in the yard. but something in the picture tightened my chest. The background was blank. No sky, no horizon, just white. No future drawn beyond the walls. I placed my hand gently on his back. "That's beautiful," I said. Claire smiled warmly at him, a perfect picture of family affection. Then she spoke, lightly, almost as an afterthought. "It would be wonderful if he grew up here. If we made this house into something we could all build together." There it was, the vision she wanted us to adopt: collective ownership, shared legacy, but structured under her direction. I breathed slowly. Calm, no urgency, no reaction. "I understand what you're saying," I said. The room felt still. Everyone waited for the rest. "And I appreciate the intention." Claire's smile deepened. Hopeful, expectant. But I did not continue the way she expected. I'll continue thinking, carefully, on my own timeline. A leaf could have fallen outside, and the sound would have been loud. The candles flickered though they hadn't been lit. Claire did not frown. She did not tighten. She simply adjusted. A soft, nearly invisible shift in posture, the way a dancer corrects form mid-motion without stopping. "Of course," she said. "We trust you." But it wasn't trust. It was pause. The dinner continued. Lighter conversations returned. Nothing collapsed. But everything had changed. When dessert plates were cleared, I stood to leave. Rachel hugged me, tighter than usual. Evan patted my shoulder, friendly but firm. Claire walked me to the door. She touched my arm, warm, steady. "You know, we're doing this out of love," she said. Her voice was soft, enough to be mistaken for sincerity. But love, that requires surrender, is not love. And she knew I understood that. That was the shift. That was not a document this time. It was the drawing Jacob had handed me. I folded it carefully and placed it inside my coat pocket. When I stepped outside, the air had cooled, and the night was beginning to settle. The world felt different, not hostile, but watchful. I walked to my car slowly. The house behind me glowed warmly in the window light. But warmth can be a stage, too. I didn't look for a fighter. I've never believed conflict needs volume to be strong. I just needed someone who understood quiet pressure. When you need help, do you choose calm or aggressive? I sat at my desk that morning with a cup of coffee that had already cooled. The house was still, the kind of stillness that comes after a line has been drawn. Not victory, not loss, just the unmistakable shift of balance. The documents were still in the drawer. The checklist Claire had given me sat next to them, and Jacob's drawing rested on the refrigerator door, held up by a small magnet shaped like a sunflower, a reminder of what mattered without anyone saying the words. I opened my laptop and began searching, not frantically, not secretly, just deliberately. I looked for attorneys who specialized in estate planning, property trusts, and family asset protection. I ignored the ones with flashy websites and bold slogans. I preferred the ones with plain fonts and thorough explanations. Clarity over performance. That's how I found Samuel Rivera. His credentials were solid, not loud. His reviews mentioned words like steady, direct, patient. No one said he was charming. No one said he was intimidating. They said he was exact. That felt right. I made the appointment. When I arrived at his office, the lobby was quiet. Soft carpeting, framed black and white photos of city streets, a bowl of individually wrapped peppermints. No luxury, no pretense. A receptionist guided me to a small conference room. The table was smooth wood, a glass pitcher of water, and 2 glasses sat neatly in the center. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Sam entered a moment later. He was in his mid-50s, with calm eyes and sleeves slightly rolled up, like he wasn't there to impress anyone. He sat across from me and waited. The same kind of waiting Dr. Bennett used. "Tell me what's happening," he said. Not, "How can I help?" Not, "What do you need?" Just, "Tell me." So I did. Not everything, just the part that mattered. The folder, the missing name, the gentle pressure, the timing, the dinner. He didn't interrupt, didn't shift in his chair, didn't raise his eyebrows. He listened like someone who has heard every version of this story, but still knows each one has its own wound. When I finished, he poured water into both glasses. Only then did he speak. "This isn't uncommon," he said. "It's not malicious by default. Sometimes it's financial strain. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's influence." Influence. The word sat in the air like a quiet diagnosis. He leaned forward slightly. "What matters now is not reacting emotionally. It's observing behavior and keeping a record of it. Pressure has a pattern. Once we see the pattern, we understand the intent." I nodded. I had already begun the record, the messages, the timing, the phrasing. Sam continued, "Don't confront them. Don't warn them. Don't explain your hesitation. Just watch. When people expect compliance, they reveal themselves when they don't get it." There was no satisfaction in what he said, just clarity. Then he slid a thin pad of lined paper toward me. "Start writing everything. Down. Dates, calls, tone, even small comments. Not because we'll need to fight, but because knowing the full shape of the situation gives you control." This was of this chapter. A simple yellow legal pad. Uncomplicated. Honest. A ledger of truth. Not argument. I took it. Sam rested his hands calmly on the table. "Your role right now," he said, "is to remain still. Stillness forces clarity. They will show you whether they love you, or they love what you can give." The sentence didn't hurt. It just settled. We discussed trusts, inheritance protections, and legal boundaries. Not decisions yet, just awareness. Tools, not weapons. When I stood to leave, Sam didn't shake my hand immediately. He just looked at me with a steadiness I hadn't realized I needed. "You're not trying to win," he said. "You're trying to stay yourself." "That matters," I nodded. On the drive home, the air outside was bright but cool. The trees were beginning to lose their leaves, one by one. Seasons don't argue when it's time to change. They just do. Inside the house, I placed the yellow legal pad beside the folder in the drawer. Not hidden. Visible. Real. Then I picked up a pen and wrote the first line on the page. "Observe everything. React to nothing." My handwriting was steady. The house felt different now. Not threatened, not tense. Just quietly preparing. The house is different at night. During the day, memories live in the walls. But at night, memory turns into echo. Soft, but unmistakable. Do you prefer mornings or nights? It was a little after 9 p.m. when the phone rang. Not loud, not alarming, just the gentle vibration of a call that doesn't wait for permission. The screen lit up with Claire's name. I let it ring once, twice. Answered on the third, her voice came through warm. The kind of warm that sounds like it's wrapping you in a blanket you didn't ask for. "Hi," she said softly. "I just wanted to check in. How was your day?" Not a question about truth, just a question that keeps contact intact. "It was all right," I said. Quiet. She breathed out a sound that wasn't quite a sigh. "I thought about you today," she said. "I know all of this has been a lot." The empathy was placed gently, perfectly, like a hand resting on a piano key without pressing it. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence answer, and Claire, as always, filled silence with warmth. "We're not rushing you," she continued. "I want you to know that. We just want to be sure things are taken care of. You deserve ease. You've spent so many years carrying everything." It would have been a comforting sentence if the timing were different. Kindness is only kindness when it has no destination. I leaned back in my chair. The house lights were dim. The refrigerator hummed softly from the kitchen. The air felt still. "I understand," I said. And I did. Understanding, however, is not agreement. Claire's tone shifted just slightly. Not colder, not sharper, just more precise. "It might help," she said, "if we go through the documents together. Not to pressure you, just to walk through it side by side. I can explain the parts that feel heavy. Side by side. Not equal. Guided." The phrasing was careful. She was inviting me to let her narrate what I should see. "I'm still reviewing," I replied. A pause. A soft one. But a pause. She adjusted her approach like someone who had practiced the pivot. "Of course. Of course. Take all the time you need." Warm, reassuring. And then, it's just that the longer these things stay undecided, the harder it becomes for everyone emotionally. Uncertainty creates distance, and none of us want distance. There it was. Not pressure on the documents, pressure on the relationships. A different kind of leverage. I listened. I didn't challenge. I didn't explain. "Stillness is a strategy," Sam had said. The phone felt warm in my hand from the heat of my palm. "I hear you," I said. There was another silence, but this one belonged to her, not me. Then Claire's voice softened further. "We love you," she said, "and we want to be close. That's all. Love as invitation, love as persuasion, love as the currency for compliance." Before I could answer, I heard another voice in the background, Evan speaking quietly, muffled. But the tone was unmistakable, expectation disguised as concern. Claire covered the receiver slightly. Not enough to hide, just enough to pretend to. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "Maybe we can meet tomorrow. Just talk. Just connect." Not a request. Not quite a question. This was the moment Dr. Bennett had prepared me for. I read from the boundary script in my mind. Not aloud. Not obviously. Just enough to guide my tone. "Not tomorrow," I said. "I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." No explanation. No apology. No justification. Silence. Soft. Still. Sharp. Then, "Okay," Claire murmured. I understand. But she didn't. Not yet. We ended the call politely. No raised voices, no fracture, just pause. When I set the phone down, the house felt exactly the same. But I didn't. This was the of the chapter. I reached for the yellow legal pad Sam had given me and wrote, "C. 14 p.m. Claire called. Tone warm. Message, help framed as love. Suggestion, meet tomorrow. Underlying concern. Timeline. Response. Calm. No commitments. The pen didn't shake. The act of writing wasn't about protection. It was about clarity. Patterns cannot hide once. Named. I sat back. The refrigerator hummed again. The house breathed around me. Outside, the garden gate creaked in the wind. That soft, familiar sound. As if the night itself was acknowledging the shift. Not a confrontation. Not a victory. Just a quiet, deliberate holding of ground. Children don't hide truth. They don't strategize. They just repeat what the room teaches them. Who is the youngest person in your home right now? It was a Saturday morning when Rachel dropped Jacob off. She stood on the porch with that tired look again, like she hadn't slept well. Not exhaustion, tension. She smiled a small, soft smile. Just a few hours, she said. He's been asking to see you. I nodded and opened the door wider. Jacob ran inside, backpack bouncing, shoes thumping happily. He moved through the house like it was his second skin. Rachel didn't step inside. She kept her hands in her coat pockets. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Always," I answered. She nodded once and left. No added explanation. No words about the documents. No requests. Just silence. Jacob was already at the kitchen table, crayons spread like candy on the wood. "Can we draw the garden?" he asked. "Of course," I said. We sat there for a while, the gentle rustle of paper and crayon filling the room. No pressure. No planning. Just presence. He drew the way children always draw. Confidently. Without hesitation. Without worrying if things look the way they are supposed to look. His garden had big flowers and tall trees, and the gate, the squeaky one, drawn as a crooked rectangle. He even drew me, sitting on the bench. Round head, big smile. I watched him lean in close, tongue between his teeth, focusing hard on the details. Children take care with what matters to them. After a few minutes, he paused and looked toward the hallway, toward the drawer where the papers were. "Mom said you're thinking," he said. The sentence was too precise for him, too formed, not his words. Keeping my voice gentle, I asked, "What do you think that means?" Jacob shrugged. "Just thinking," he repeated. "Mom said that sometimes grown-ups think for a long time because they love people and want to choose right." His phrasing carried the tone of someone trying to understand a lesson taught. Secondhand, not manipulated, just absorbing. "And what do you think?" I asked. He paused, crayon held above the page. "I think you already know," he said simply. "Children, when free, speak truth." He went back to coloring, filling in the sky. Bright blue, no clouds. But after a moment, he spoke again. Quieter this time. "Claire said houses don't last forever." There was no tension in his voice, no agenda, just repetition. I felt something inside me still, not break, not tighten, just still. "And what do you think about that?" I asked. He frowned, small and thoughtful. "I think houses last, if people love them." His crayon moved slowly now, a child taking care to get the shape right. Sat with that, I didn't correct. Him, I didn't explain the complexities of inheritance or trust, or the quiet machinery of persuasion. Just let the truth sit in the center of the table, like a bowl of fruit. No one had to talk about, to acknowledge. His drawing was nearly done when he added something unexpected, a fourth figure, not me, not him, not flowers, not trees. A small figure, with long hair standing near the garden gate. "Who's that?" I asked softly. "That's the person who wants to change the house," he said. Matter of fact. Not fearful, just naming what he has seen. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Children draw roles, not titles. This was the of the chapter, more revealing than any document. A child's drawing that showed the truth of influence. When Rachel returned to pick him up, she saw the drawing on the table. Her breath caught. Just barely. Her eyes flicked to mine. Not accusation. Not defense. Just realization, not of blame, of impact. She hugged Jacob, tight when they left, longer than usual, like someone who remembered something, unfinished inside herself. The house was quiet again. When the door closed, I sat back down at the kitchen table, the drawing still in front of me. There were no signatures on it. No legal phrasing, no complex clauses. Just 4 figures in a garden. One of them didn't belong, not to memory, not to history, not to the soil of the place. And the smallest child knew it. I folded the drawing carefully and placed it in the same drawer as the documents. Not hidden, not buried, just kept. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be held. Pressure rarely arrives all at once. It comes in layers. Soft, suggestion, gentle repetition. Then, timing. Timing is what reveals intention. Turn to A. Do you notice patterns easily, or do they take time to become clear? It was a quiet morning, the kind where nothing should go wrong. I brewed coffee, opened the blinds, and let the sunlight fall into the kitchen. The house felt almost peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. Evan stood there, hands in his pockets, jaw tight in a way he tried to hide. "I thought we could talk," he said. We sat at the table. The same place everything always seemed to happen now. He didn't touch his coffee. He leaned forward, shoulders tense. "Dad, things are a little tight right now." Not a confession, not vulnerability, a setup. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Stillness is its own kind of mirror. People show themselves when silence gives them space. Evan took a breath. "I made some investments. They'll pay off. They will. But right now, we're caught between timing and interest rates, and..." He stopped, swallowed, recalculated. "I just need things to be stable for a while. If the house transfers early, we can use the equity to..." There it was, not spoken outright, but no longer hidden. Stability. Liquidity. Liquidity. Leverage. The house wasn't a legacy in their plan, it was a lifeboat, and they were already in the water. I felt something quiet inside me. Not anger, not betrayal, just clarity. I nodded slowly. "I understand." "You're under pressure," I said. His eyes softened in relief. "But I'm not making decisions under pressure." Relief vanished. Evan stared at me, searching for persuasion. He didn't find it. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Not a sigh. Recalibration. "It doesn't have to be dramatic," he said. "We're just trying to make sure the family is secure. Claire is helping us see the big picture." Claire again. Always Claire. Not forceful. Just guiding. Gently. Constantly. I didn't respond. I let the silence widen. He reached into his bag, not hesitant, practiced, and placed the folder on the table again. But this time, something was different. The folder was thinner. Not all the pages were there. The signature page, the asset list, the transition conditions, they were present. But the page about beneficiary distribution percentages, the one I had flagged, the one that had quietly excluded Jacob, was missing. Gone. Removed. Replaced with a revised version that listed only 2 names, Evan Hayes, Rachel. Hayes no mention of future heirs, no provision for grandchildren, no continuity, just consolidation. This was the, not discovery, but confirmation. The mistake wasn't a mistake. It had been a plan. Not malicious. Not emotional. Just opportunistic. Evan noticed me scanning the pages. His voice softened. "Dad, we're family. We look out for each other. You'll be taken care of. Always." Always is a word that asks you not to look closely. I closed the folder calmly. Slowly. Not rejecting. Not accepting. Just closing. "When did Claire suggest removing the 3rd beneficiary line?" I asked. The question landed like a quiet stone. Dropped in deep water. No accusation. No tone. Just truth. Evan froze for a second. It was enough. He didn't answer because he didn't need to. The silence was the answer. He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit from childhood. We just thought. I stopped him, gently. I know what you thought. His eyes lifted to ID mine. This wasn't a confrontation. This was recognition. Evan wasn't the architect. He was the one being led. But influence is still impact. I stood and placed the folder back in the drawer myself, in full view of him, not hidden, not protected, just claimed. This house stays a home, I said quietly. Not a solution. His expression wasn't angry. It was something worse. Fear. Not of losing the house, but of losing the plan. He stood slowly. I'll tell Claire we talked, he said. He didn't. Hug me. He didn't look back. He just walked out. The garden gate squeaked as he left. The sound had never felt so loud. I stood alone in the kitchen, hand still resting on the drawer. Not victorious. Not resolved. Just aware. The shape of the pressure was clear now. The timing. The strategy. The orchestration. And now that the trap was visible, there was only one thing left to do. Prepare my next move. Quietly. I didn't change anything out of anger. Anger is loud. Anger makes you careless. I made changes because clarity had finally settled. Have you ever made a decision quietly, without announcing it to anyone? The day after Evan left, I called Sam. Not a long call. Not dramatic. Just a simple sentence. It's time. He didn't ask for details. He didn't say, I told you so. He just said, come in tomorrow. Bring the documents you want to keep, and the ones you want to protect. The next morning was cool and bright. The kind of morning that feels like it's already halfway to a new season. I drove without the radio on. Silence lets the mind breathe. The legal pad sat in the passenger seat. My notes were neat, dated, calm. No frantic scribbling, observation, not reaction. Sam greeted me with that same steady presence. A cup of tea sat waiting on the table. He listened while I spoke, though there wasn't much to say. They need the house as an answer to something that isn't mine to solve, I said. But the house was built for memory, not leverage. Sam nodded slowly. That's a boundary, he said. Not a wall. He opened a new file folder, clean, unmarked, a beginning. We discussed trusts, not as shields, but as structure. We added protective clauses, not to punish, but to preserve. This wasn't about removing my children. This was about including the future. We wrote the house into a living trust. With specific language, the house cannot be sold during my lifetime. The house cannot be used as collateral. The house remains accessible to family, as a home, not an asset. And most importantly, upon my passing, the property transfers to my grandson, Jacob, with Rachel and Evan as stewards, not owners, stewards, not takers, caretakers of memory, not beneficiaries of value. It meant they were part of the legacy, but could no longer control it. Sam explained it simply. You're not removing anyone. You're restoring the original shape of the family. I didn't feel victorious, just settled. We reviewed the document line by line. Language that was once overwhelming now felt clear. I understood every word. When it came time to sign, Sam placed the pen on the table gently, like a formality rather than a moment. I rested my hand on the paper. I thought of Lily, sitting on the porch in her blanket, watching me repaint the garden gate. She told me once, love protects what it wants to last. Not love for people, love for meaning. I signed my name, slow, without hesitation, not claiming anything, just preserving. This was the of this chapter. A trust agreement, not dramatic, not emotional, just steady. Sam gathered the documents and slid them into a protective portfolio. "I'll file everything today," he said. "It'll be official by the end of the week. No one can override it without your consent." I nodded. On the drive home, the silence felt different. Not empty. Clear. The house greeted me the same way it always did. Gentle familiarity. The wooden floors creaked in the hallway. The scent of old lavender cleaner lingered faintly in the air. I walked room to room, not searching, just being present. In the living room, sunlight stretched across the floorboards in long, warm lines. I sat on the same bench Lily and I used to sit on when the world felt too loud. I thought of Evan, of Rachel, of the parts of them that are still trying, still unsure, still shaped by spaces they didn't know how to name. I did not blame them. I would not blame them. But love without boundaries is not love. It is erasure. And I was done erasing. I went to the kitchen drawer, the one that had held the original documents. I opened it. The folder sat there exactly where it had been placed. I didn't touch it. Instead, I placed the new trust documents beside it. Not over it, not instead of it, beside it. One represented pressure. The other represented choice. And the house, quiet and warm around me, represented memory. I closed the drawer. Softly, no ceremony, no announcement, no declaration. Just a quiet shift. Something that had been uncertain was now decided. There are conversations where everyone already knows the outcome before a single word is spoken. They just need to hear it aloud. Have you ever rehearsed a conversation in your head before it happened? I didn't call them. I didn't announce anything. I simply invited them to dinner. The same way families have done for generations. A quiet message, a simple time, a familiar table. They arrived together. Evan walked in first, shoulders squared, prepared for efficiency. Rachel followed, arms folded lightly across her chest, something guarded but hopeful in her eyes. And Claire, she entered slowly, offering a warm smile, her presence still shaped like comfort. The table was already set. 1 meal, 4 plates. No conversation, yet we sat. No one reached for the food. Silence filled the chairs before words did. I kept my voice, soft. I've made some decisions about the house. No drama, no build-up, just the truth placed gently. In the center of the table, like a bowl, Evan leaned forward, almost before the sentence finished. "Good," he said. "We can go over everything tonight." It's done," I said. The sentence was almost whispered, but it froze the air. Rachel inhaled, slow, shaky, like someone bracing for impact. Claire didn't blink. Her stillness was her tell. I continued. "I met with an attorney. The house is now in a trust. It cannot be sold, borrowed against, or transferred during my lifetime. No hesitation, no apology, just clarity." Evan's jaw tightened. His hands curled, not into fists, just into effort. "Dad," he said carefully, "you didn't tell us you were doing that." "I didn't need to," I replied. Not defensive, not sharp, just factual. Rachel looked down at her hands. Her shoulders softened, a small release of tension that had been coiled for months, maybe years. Claire was the one who spoke next. Her tone stayed warm, gentle, balanced. "We understand wanting stability," she said, "but decisions like this affect everyone. We should do things as a family, together." Her phrasing was good, very good. Unity as leverage, belonging as pressure. I nodded once. I agree. Family decisions should be made as a family. Her expression softened, believing she had found an opening. Which is when I continued. But a decision that removes someone else's future, especially a child's, is not a family decision. It's a strategy. The room didn't move. Even the clock seemed to. Quiet. Rachel's head lifted, slowly, like a weight was being removed rather than added. Jacob's missing signature line was no longer abstract. It was now a truth spoken aloud. Evan opened his mouth, but the sentence he had arrived with didn't fit anymore. He closed it again. Claire exhaled softly. Not frustration, recalculation. I kept my voice steady. The house will pass to Jacob one day. Not to be sold, not to be leveraged, to remain a home. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes filled, not with grief, but with relief. Something in her had been waiting for someone to draw a line. Evan leaned back, hands on his knees, staring at the floor. He wasn't angry. He was lost. Because when the plan stopped making sense, the fear beneath it became visible. Claire looked at me, truly looked, for the first time since this began. Her smile didn't disappear, but it stopped being a shield. You've made up your mind, she said softly. I have. No justification. No argument. Just truth resting where it belonged. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table to them, a summary copy of the trust. Simple, factual, clear. No dramatic stack of documents. Just one page. Of this chapter. Rachel reached for it with a trembling hand. Evan didn't move. Claire studied. Me, not the paper, me. Then, we'll adjust, she said. Not surrender. Not defeat. Just acknowledgement that the direction had changed. They finished dinner because life doesn't stop for clarity. Meals still need to be eaten. Dishes still need washing. Humans continue in ordinary motions even after something quiet and irreversible has happened. When they stood to leave, Rachel hugged me, not tentative, not polite. Real. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For the house? For protecting Jacob? For choosing boundary instead of resentment? Maybe all of it. Evan put a hand on my shoulder. No words, just weight. Something like apology. Something like surrender. Claire paused at the door. She met my eyes. Her smile returned, smaller now, but honest enough to respect. You did what you believe is right, she said. I nodded. I did. When the door closed, the house didn't feel empty. It felt intact, not won, not defended, simply kept. Most endings don't arrive like storms. They arrive like changing tides, slowly, almost politely, so that you don't notice the shoreline has shifted until you look back. Have you ever watched someone pull away gently, instead of all at once? The day after the dinner, the house was quieter than usual, not empty, just still. I moved through the morning slowly. The kettle hissed softly. The windows drew long, pale rectangles of light across the floor. I could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower on another street. Life was continuing, with or without discussion. Evan didn't call. Rachel didn't send a message. Claire didn't check. The absence wasn't sharp. It didn't hurt. It simply was, like a room where someone has just left. The air still shaped. Around where they were, I knew better than to chase that. Silence. Chasing silence turns it into something heavier than it needs to be. So I let it sit. Over the next few days, the rhythm changed in ways subtle and gradual. Evan visited less, and when he did, his steps were slower, his posture smaller. The confident certainty he had carried like a second spine had softened into something closer to searching. He didn't bring documents anymore. He didn't mention planning. He didn't say the word house. He just sat at the table and asked how I was doing. Sometimes we spoke. Sometimes we didn't. Silence had become its own language between us, not hostile, not cold, just quiet truth settling in layers. Rachel's A. Messages grew simpler. Short check-ins, a picture of Jacob's latest. Drawing, a weather update. Small things, gentle things. Not because she didn't have more to say, but because she didn't want to push. She was learning boundary. 2. Claire, though. Claire didn't text, didn't call, didn't send anything through. Anyone. She didn't disappear, she withdrew, like someone stepping back from a painting to observe the entire composition. At once, this wasn't retreat, it was recalibration. So, respected it. People who rely on influence need space to rebalance when the equation changes. I spent my afternoons in the garden, repairing the bench, clearing the dead stems of winter flowers, sanding the surface of the gate, just enough to smooth the roughness, but not enough to remove the history of hands that had touched it. The squeak remained, on purpose. Some sounds are identity. The garden wasn't perfect. It never had been. But it was lived in, and that mattered more than symmetry. One afternoon, while trimming the rosemary, I found a small blue marble half buried in the dirt. Jacob must have lost it months ago. I held it in my palm. A tiny thing, but full of weight in the story of this place. Memory doesn't announce itself. It waits to be uncovered. The days continued like this, slow, steady, unremarkable, peaceful, even. Some evenings I caught myself listening for footsteps at the door, or the soft buzz of a text, or a voice calling through the hallway. Not longing, just remembering. Relationships don't end when boundaries are set. They simply shift into their true shapes. One afternoon, I heard a car door close outside. Rachel. She knocked, lightly, and stepped in when I opened the door. No pretense, no hesitation. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I set in front of her. I needed time, she said. I know. Silence. But this silence felt shared now, not separating. She looked at the refrigerator, at her son's drawing, the one with the 4 figures, the extra one near the garden gate. Her eyes softened. I didn't realize how much I was letting other people speak for me, she said quietly. Not an apology, not an explanation, just recognition. When you drew the boundary, she continued, I think you drew one for me, too. I nodded. We didn't need to say more. Outside, the breeze moved the garden gate gently. The familiar squeak drifted inside. Life hadn't ruptured. It had simply reorganized. People think distance means love is fading. But sometimes distance is just love, learning how to stand on its own feet. Later, when the house grew quiet again, I wrote in the legal pad, relationships are not lost. They are adjusting. Let the adjustment take its time. No urgency, no conclusion. Just the slow work of remaining steady. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like triumph or revelation or even peace. Sometimes it just feels like the moment you stop bracing. Do you breathe deeply often? Or do you forget until someone reminds you? I returned to Dr. Bennett's office a week after the dinner. Not because something was wrong. Not because I needed guidance, but because I needed to witness where I now stood. The waiting room was the same. Quiet chairs, soft lighting, the same photograph of the coastline. But it looked different to me now. Not because the space had changed, but because I had. When I sat down, Dr. Bennett just nodded. Not an invitation. Not an expectation. Just presence. I took a slow breath. My children are adjusting, I said. No emotion, just observation. She waited. Her patience was not passive, It was intentional. The kind of silence that asks the world to speak for itself. They aren't pushing anymore, I continued. There's distance right now. Not conflict, just space. I paused, searching for the right word. Rebalancing, she offered gently. Yes, rebalancing. She leaned forward slightly. What did it feel like to say no and maintain no? Not the first refusal, the continued refusal. Boundary sustained. I closed my eyes for a moment, noticing the feeling instead of thinking the answer. It felt calm, I said. Not triumphant, not victorious. Just still. Stillness, not silence, is what control feels like after you reclaim it. Dr. Bennett nodded. That's what alignment feels like. When your choices match your values, the body recognizes it before the mind does. That resonated in a way that was almost physical. A quiet, settling in the chest. She asked about Rachel. I told her about the drawing. The 4 figures. The one that didn't belong. She didn't react with surprise or interpretation. She only said, "Children show what adults try to hide." Then she asked about Evan. He looks like someone who's realizing the ladder he climbed leads somewhere he doesn't want to be, I said. She didn't ask about Claire. She didn't need to. Silence took the seat beside us. What do you feel toward her? She finally asked. Not anger, not resentment. I searched. Understanding, I said slowly. She wasn't trying to take something from me. She was trying to solve a problem she didn't trust life to solve for her. Dr. Bennett's expression shifted. Not approval, not sympathy, acknowledgement. Seeing motive instead of blame is maturity, she said. But maturity doesn't erase impact. It simply allows compassion without surrender. Compassion without surrender. Yes, that's what the last weeks had been teaching me. We sat for a moment, letting that settle. Then she reached toward the small end table beside her and handed me a single sheet of paper. Not the same boundary script from before. This one was titled Release vs. Retain 2 columns. Simple. Left side, their expectations, their timeline, their interpretation, their fear. Their story, right side, my pace, my clarity, my responsibility, my memory, my truth. This is not a lesson, she said. It's a reminder. Your job is not to carry other people's urgency. Your job is to carry your name with dignity. This was of this chapter. Not defensive, not protective. Just clarifying. Before I left, she asked one final question. Do you feel alone in this? I thought of the garden, the squeaking gate, the sunlight on the dining room floor, Jacob's laughter echoing down the hallway. No, I said. I feel held by the life I already built. She smiled, not warmly, not softly, just truly. I walked out of her office into late afternoon light. The sky was pale blue. The air gentle, the world familiar. When I got home, I didn't head to the kitchen. I went straight to the backyard. The rosemary moved in the breeze. The gate creaked, like always. Not warning, not memory, just presence. I sat on the bench. My hands rested open. My breathing was steady. Grief didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like something I had carried to a place where it could finally set itself down. Some changes arrive quietly, not with declarations or milestones, but with morning light falling differently across a familiar floor. What season feels most like home to you? Spring came early that year. The air warmed before the calendar said it should. Small green buds appeared on the branches outside my window, like the world had decided to begin again before anyone asked it to. One morning, I woke up, and the house felt bright. Not new, just alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I opened the windows and let the air move through the rooms. The curtains lifted gently, as if the house was breathing with me. I walked slowly through the hallway, and the sunlight stretched along the floorboards, golden, even, patient. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the house was something I needed to protect. I felt like the house was protecting me. I made coffee and sat by the window overlooking the garden. The gate squeaked when the wind moved it. The same sound as always, but no longer sharp. It sounded like memory, not warning. After breakfast, I went outside to work on the garden. Dirt has a way of grounding you. It reminds you that everything grows slowly, 1 inch, 1 root, 1 season at a time. I cleared away the brittle stems of winter and turned the soil with my hands. The earth was cool and damp, full of potential. While I worked, I noticed a robin land on the fence. It tilted its head at me, unafraid, unhurried, just observing. Presence, recognizing presence. I spent the next few hours trimming the rosemary, shaping the hydrangeas, and reseeding the patches of grass that had thinned over winter. The gate creaked each time I passed through, the sound now part of the rhythm of the day. Later, I went inside to sweep the hallway. As I did, I saw something tucked partly under the baseboard near the stairs, a small corner of paper. I knelt down and pulled it free. It was Jacob's drawing, the first one he made, the one before the 4th figure appeared. 2 figures in the garden, him and me. Open sky, flowers, home. I must have dropped it during the early tension, when everything had felt heavier than truth. But now, here it was, resurfacing when the air was clear enough to receive it. This was the chapter, not documentation, not legality. Memory returning to where it belonged. I smoothed the drawing gently and placed it back on the refrigerator beside the newer one. The 2 versions of our home, then and now, hanging together. Time does not erase. It layers. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Jacob was standing there. Backpack on, sneakers untied, a grin that could undo winters. Rachel stood behind him, hands in her coat pockets, the same posture she always used when she was unsure of her place. But this time, she didn't look unsure, just quiet and present. "Are you free?" she asked. I nodded and stepped aside. Jacob ran straight to the backyard, out the door, through the hallway, where the spring light still lay like a path. Rachel stayed in the kitchen with me. She didn't ask about the trust. She didn't mention the dinner. She didn't apologize or explain or repair. She just said, "I've been thinking about how Mom used to sit in the garden at this time of year. Do you remember the way she would tuck her feet under the chair?" I smiled. Yes. She always said it made her feel grounded to the earth without getting dirt on her shoes. Rachel laughed, just once, a small, real sound. Then her eyes softened in the way memory softens people. "She loved this place," she said. "She did," I replied. "We didn't need to say so, do we?" It was understood. We stood at the window and watched Jacob play, running between the rosemary and the hydrangea, touching everything gently, like he was greeting old friends. The garden wasn't a battleground anymore. It was a home again. Later, when they left, the hallway was still full of that same warm light. Soft, golden, patient. I stood there for a long time, not thinking, just existing. Spring doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives when the world is ready to receive it. Most things in life don't return on schedule. They return when you're steady enough to face them. Is there something you haven't opened yet? It was late afternoon when I found the envelope. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just clearing the top drawer in the hallway, the one that collects keys, old receipts, spare screwdrivers, birthday cards that never got mailed. Everyday clutter, everyday memory. The envelope was tucked between a gardening catalog and a packet of rubber bands. Plain, cream-colored. No logo, no markings, just my name. Written in Claire's handwriting. Neat, rounded, unhurried. I knew when it had arrived. That night I had said no. The night I drew a line. I hadn't opened it then. I had placed it in the drawer and closed it. Not avoiding. Just choosing the timing myself. Timing is a form of self-respect. I held it now for a moment. It felt light. Too light to hold anything heavy. But sometimes, weight isn't in the paper. It's in the meaning. I sat at the kitchen table, same seat, same soft light, same familiar grain of the wood. But the air no longer held tension. It held clarity. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. Not typed. Handwritten. Claire's handwriting was calm. Measured. Even her loops were symmetrical. Michael, I want you to know that I never wanted to take anything from you. I only wanted to create stability for our family. For all of us. I could see things that were coming. And I was afraid. Afraid that life would become unmanageable. That we would struggle in ways we weren't prepared for. I stepped forward because I thought I could hold everything together. Maybe I overreached. Maybe I didn't listen closely enough to the meaning the house has for you. Maybe I saw numbers when I should have seen memory. I'm sorry, if that matters. Claire. No blame. No plea. No justification. Not manipulation. Not surrender. Just truth. Or at least her version of it. I read it twice, not looking for hidden meaning. Just letting it be what it was. Fear. Trying to disguise itself as planning. Care. Trying to disguise itself as control. People rarely harm out of cruelty. They harm out of the belief that they must solve a problem alone. I looked out the kitchen window. The garden moved gently in the breeze. The gate creaked softly. Not warning, not memory. Just the sound of wood living its life in weather. I sat with the letter for a long time, not deciding, just acknowledging. She had spoken her truth. Now I needed to speak mine. I pulled out a sheet of stationery, the kind Lily used to use when writing thank you notes. My handwriting is slower than it used to be, but steady. Claire, I know you were trying to help. I know your intentions were shaped by care and fear, not greed. But the house is not a solution. It is memory, and memory is not something that needs to be optimized. I am not angry. I am simply choosing stewardship instead of surrender. I wish you peace with the things you are trying to hold. Michael, this was the not legal, not corrective. Just a clean line between understanding and self-preservation. I placed the letter into an envelope, sealed it, and set it by the front door. I would bring it to her myself, not to rekindle conversation, but to close a loop gently. As I stood, I noticed the house felt quiet in a new way. Not hollow, not emptied. Balanced. Stability isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of alignment. I walked through the hallway. The late light stretched across the floor in soft gold bands. Jacob's drawings hung on the refrigerator. Both of them. One before understanding, one after. Two versions of the same story. Two truths held at once. Outside, The sky was turning the color of early evening, a blue that looks almost like memory. I stood for a moment at the doorway, envelope in hand, breathing slowly, not steadying myself, just breathing. Some endings aren't endings, they are simply acknowledgments that a chapter has finished its purpose. I didn't understand the question the first time I asked it. Not fully, not in the way I understand it now. What part of this story stayed with you? The house was quiet the next morning. Not silent, just resting. Like something had set itself down after being carried too far, for too long. I made breakfast the same way I always do. 2 eggs, toast, black coffee. Routine has become its own kind of peace. The envelope for Claire sat near the front door. I didn't rush to deliver it. I wasn't delaying, I was letting the day unfold on its own terms. Around noon, there was a knock. Not urgent, not hesitant, just present. I opened the door, and there was Jacob, holding a shoebox in both arms. Rachel stood behind him, hands in her pockets, warm in her expression but quiet in her posture. "Grandpa," Jacob said, "I made something." He walked past me like he always has, comfortable, unafraid, and set the shoebox on the kitchen table. He opened it. Inside were drawings. Not just one. Dozens. The house in every season. The garden in every stage of life. The gate. The bench. Me. Him. Rachel. Evan. Even Claire. In some. But always, always. The house was drawn open. Windows unshaded. Doors not closed. A home. Not a structure. Children don't draw lies. They draw what is true to them. Rachel stood in the doorway, watching us, her eyes soft with something unburdened. "He said he wanted to remember what home feels like," she said quietly. I felt something in my chest loosen, the way soil loosens when spring rain finally reaches it. I asked Jacob, "What made you want to draw these?" He shrugged, the way children shrug when the answer is simple. "Because this is where we don't hurry," he said. "Not where we live, not where we gather, where we don't hurry." I placed my hand on the table, steadying myself not out of weakness, but out of recognition. This house has never been about walls or title deeds or signatures. It's been about pace, breathing, return, belonging. The kind of belonging that doesn't need to be earned or proven. I looked at Rachel. She met my eyes. "I understand now," she said. There was no guilt in her voice, no apology, just understanding. The simplest and rarest form of reconciliation. Evan didn't come that day, and that's okay. Healing doesn't move at the same speed for everyone. Some people need time to step back through the doors they once closed too quickly. I believe he will return, not because I hope for it, but because I know love that is steady is something people eventually recognize. We cleaned space on the refrigerator and tacked up the new drawings. Not covering the old ones, just adding to them. A living gallery of seasons. That was the last. Not a document, not a contract, not a defense, just a child's drawing, placed beside another. The story of this house has always been written in pencil and crayon, not ink. When Rachel and Jacob left, the house grew quiet again. Not the quiet of loss, but the quiet of something completed. I walked to the hallway drawer, slid it open, and looked at the 2 folders inside. The first, the one they brought, heavy with intention. The second, the one I signed, steady with clarity. Between them, I placed Jacob's drawings, one representing the past, one representing the future, one representing the bridge between them. I closed the drawer gently, not sealing it, not locking it, Just acknowledging it had a place. I looked around the house, not as something to guard, but as something that will outlive every conversation that ever took place inside it. And I said, aloud, to no one and to everyone, my children once said, "Just sign here." And I asked, whose name is missing? Now I know. The name that was missing was not Jacob's. It was mine. Not legally, but spiritually. I had been signing away myself for years in the name of peace. Now peace is something I keep, not something I trade. The house is quiet. The garden is growing. The gate still squeaks. The light still falls across the floor. And I am here. Fully here.